Hi, friends. Well, today we are going to talk about how you can improve your brain health this year in 2025. Welcome, friends. I'm Kathy Weens, owner of Kathy Weens Coaching, and I am on a mission to help women in their 60s and beyond to become more empowered, to live a life of purpose, to live the life that you've always wanted to live. And that's what my channel is all about. Now, today we're going to talk about brain health, and that is certainly a part of living a healthy life. But first, I have some questions for you. Do you ever have trouble concentrating, focusing on things? Do you ever have trouble sleeping? Maybe you can get to sleep, but you wake up in the middle of the night, or you're just not getting the quality sleep that you'd like to have. And another question is, are you gaining weight around your belly, having a little more belly fat than is normal? Well, this is something that's happened to me as I've aged. Now, these are all symptoms of things, and they may seem like, they're not related, but the reality is, and this is what we're talking about today, is that they are related. There's one thing that ties all of these things together. It's a hormone, and it's called cortisol. So we're going to talk about cortisol today, what it is, how it can harm your brain health, and then some things that you can do to overcome it. All right, let's get started. So cortisol is produced by the adrenal glands. It's a hormone produced by the adrenal glands, and it's a stress hormone. And so it engages us when we have cortisol, it engages us in that fight or flight response. Now, when we perceive a threat, that's when our brain releases cortisol. So we can, get ready to handle this threat, either fight or flight. Sometimes we also talk about freeze and fawn, but the cortisol is what gets us ready to do that. And so when our brain excretes the cortisol, it gets our body ready. So we have more energy, maybe more, really good, precise focus. Our heart rate increases, our blood pressure increases. There's more blood going to our legs and our arms. But then what also happens is that we are reducing the activity in our prefrontal cortex. That's the thinking part of the brain. Now, an example that I always give about this when I'm doing talks on trauma is sort of this concept of the triune brain. And it's very simplistic, but we have the thinking part of the brain, which most of us are in right now. Hopefully you're in a safe space. You're listening to me talk, so I'm giving you language. You're interpreting that language, you're hearing it and interpreting it, and that all happens here in our prefrontal cortex. However, well, let me talk about other parts of the brain. So there's the prefrontal cortex, there's the limbic system, which is the emotional part of the brain. That's where the amygdala is housed, and that's the fear center of the brain. And then we have our brain stem, which is the instinctual part of the brain, and that regulates things like blood pressure, heart rate. So that gets activated too when cortisol is released. So again, like I said, right now, we're all pretty much in our prefrontal cortex. No threats really that we're feeling. However, if there was someone that walked into the room where you're sitting now with a gun or a knife, or you feared was going to threaten you physically in some way, your brain would not stay in the prefrontal cortex. It would move back into the limbic system and the brain stem, and your body would get ready to either fight or flight to protect yourself from the perceived danger. And one way we know that we move out of our prefrontal cortex is, if that would happen, you would not sit there and think, so say it was someone with a gun, you wouldn't sit there and think, well, I wonder what kind of gun that is. Is that an AK-47 or is that a rifle? You would not be thinking that. Your body would get ready to protect yourself, to save yourself. So that's what cortisol does. It pushes our body into that mode. So in that way, cortisol can be very helpful to us. It gets us ready to protect ourselves. However, in the kind of lives that we live today, we often have perceived threats that aren't actually physical threats. So we can think of these as mental stress or physical stress. But you know what? Our brain doesn't know the difference. Our brain doesn't know the difference. A threat is a threat to our brain, and it releases the danger, danger, danger sign. And then our body starts producing the cortisol. And that's where we can get into trouble. And that's how the cortisol can harm our brain. Because in today's world, we are often under this mental stress. And it's not like, cavemen or our ancestors where a wild animal would be chasing them and they could run away and get away from the stress and then maybe go, someplace safe, their cave or wherever. And then they could do what is called rest and digest. And that's sort of the cycle of cortisol. It can go up, and then when we're safe, it goes down. But when we have this mental stress, the cortisol can go up because we feel like there's a threat, but it doesn't really go down. And that is harmful to our brain. So now I'm going to share with you some of the ways that cortisol can impact our brain. So the first one is that it can shrink our hippocampus. Now, the hippocampus is a region in our brain that is there for learning and memory. And it's highly sensitive to cortisol. So when we have prolonged periods of stress or prolonged periods where our cortisol is high, then the hippocampus can actually start to shrink. And that impairs our ability to form new memories or to retrieve old memories. And this shrinking of our hippocampus can actually lead to diseases like Alzheimer's or dementia. Now, another way that cortisol can affect our brain is that it impairs our neuroplasticity. Now, neuroplasticity refers to the way our brain can adapt and can actually form new synapses so we can learn new things. It isn't true that you can't teach an old dog new tricks. With neuroplasticity, we can learn new things at any age. However, when we have too much stress in our life, aka too much cortisol and other stress hormones, then that can impair the neuroplasticity. And this increased or higher level of cortisol can reduce neuroplasticity and make it harder for your brain to recover from injury, to learn new skills, or to adapt to a new environment. And as we age, we're kind of losing those things. And so keeping our brain healthy is really important, especially in our older years, like me, 60 and beyond, 65 and beyond. All right, so another way that cortisol can affect our brain is that it affects the prefrontal cortex. Now, I talked about that earlier. Again, that's the thinking part of the brain. And so when cortisol harms that, it can be more difficult to make decisions. We can have less attention and emotional regulation. And higher levels of cortisol, it can lead to difficulty concentrating, poor decision making, and heightened emotional reactivity. So we just can't handle things as well. All right, so another way that cortisol affects our brain is that it increases the amygdala activity. Now, like I said earlier, the amygdala is kind of the fear center of the brain. It processes emotions such as fear and anxiety. And when it can become hyperactive over time when we have a lot of stress in our life. And so think about this, if our fear center is overactive, well, what's that going to do to the quality of our life? We're going to have more fear. Our emotional, level of threat is going to be higher. In some ways, it's like we're always going to be looking for threats rather than seeing the goodness that we have in our life. So cortisol can affect our amygdala. And all of these effects that we've talked about have a really large impact on our mental health. So we can have things like more depression, more anxiety, and elevated cortisol disrupts those balance of those neurotransmitters, such as serotonin and dopamine, and that can contribute to more mood disorders, which, mental health issues. Now, the reality is stress is just part of life, and it will always be a part of our life. But there are some things that we can do to help calm down those stress hormones, to calm down that release of cortisol so our brain can actually function better. So the first one is mindfulness and meditation. And I have talked about that a lot on my channel, and I do that because it is so important for so many aspects of our health. So mindfulness practices have been shown to reduce cortisol levels and improve brain health. And even a few minutes of deep breathing or meditation daily can make a difference. So it doesn't take a long time, but just doing it consistently, to do some deep breathing, some meditation, just pause, have some silence. A lot of my videos have good resources on this, so that can be something too that can reduce the cortisol and help us to have a healthier brain. So the next thing that we can do to reduce the cortisol, the stress in our life, and increase our brain health is exercise. And, we've all heard this before, but it really is true. Physical exercise reduces cortisol and stimulates the production of endorphins, which are feel-good hormones, and that improves mood and our cognitive function. So we want to aim for moderate exercise such as walking, yoga, or swimming. This will help us reap these benefits. And again, moderate. It doesn't have to be, hours spent at the gym. Just a 20-minute walk every day can be really helpful. Another way that we can improve our brain health by reducing cortisol is connecting with other people. And this is another thing that I talk about a lot. We need to stay healthy. We need to stay in touch with those people in our life, those good, safe people that we can really be ourselves around. This helps our mental health. And you know what? You can combine these two things. Go on a walk with a friend. That's, you're getting a double whammy there for improving your brain health. And the last one, how we can improve our brain health. Again, this is something we hear over and over again, but to eat a good, healthy, balanced diet. We want to consume more real food, more whole foods. Our body knows what to do with that. Our body knows what to do with an apple. That's a real food, a whole food. But our body doesn't really know what to do with a Twinkie. So eating those good, healthy foods, healthy fats like omega-3s that we see in fish and nuts, fruits and vegetables. You often hear about eating from the rainbow. So finding those good, nutritious things to eat. That is going to help our brain health. It's going to reduce our cortisol and to help reduce our stress levels. So as we've talked about today, I've just shared a few of the ways that we can reduce the cortisol in our life to reduce the stress level. There are many things that we can do, things like mindfulness, which we talked about, mindfulness and meditation. Journaling is another one. Practicing gratitude. These are all the things that I talk about on my channel, because what I really want to help you do is to reduce that stress in your life and increase the joy, satisfaction, and purpose that you have in life, especially at this stage of life, and especially for women. If not now, when? When are we going to start doing this? So thanks again so much for watching. And if this is your first time here, welcome. And if you've been here before, welcome back. Also, if you like the content that I'm putting out, please subscribe to my channel. It just helps this information get out further. Like this video, that also helps. And if you think someone else could benefit from this, share this video with a friend. All right, that's all I have for today. See you next time. Thanks. Bye-bye.